Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to discuss Chapter 5 Genes, Culture, and Gender. So, we move on to genes. So, under genes, we have natural selection. It is the evolutionary process by which heritable traits that best enable organisms to survive and reproduce in particular environments are passed to ensuing generations. It implies that certain genes, those that predispose traits that increase the odds of surviving long enough to reproduce and nurture descendants, became more abundant. Then we have evolutionary psychology. It is the study of the evolution of cognition and behavior using principles of natural selection. Evolutionary psychology studies how natural selection predisposes not just physical traits suited to particular contexts, such as polar bears' coats, bats' sonar, humans' color vision, but also psychological traits and social behaviors that enhance the preservation and spread of one's genes. And then we have epigenetics. Epigenetics is a field of research exploring the expression of genes across different environments. So next we have culture in relation to our behavior. So perhaps our most important similarity is that the hallmark of our species is our capacity to learn and adapt. Then we have our hormones in relation to our gender. So if genes predispose gender-related traits, they must do so by their effects on our bodies. Overall, children exposed to more testosterone in the womb exhibit the psychological pattern more typical of males, including less eye contact, lower language skill, and less empathy. And then we have the term called androgynous. It comes from the andro, which means man, one gene, woman, thus mixing both masculine and feminine characteristics. So now we move on to culture. So, cultural diversity is the diversity of our languages, customs, and expressive behaviors confirms that much of our behavior is socially programmed, not hardwired. So, we have this what we call norms or our expected behavior. As etiquette rules illustrate, all cultures have their accepted ideas about appropriate behavior. We often view this social expectation or norms as a negative force that imprisons people in a blind effort to perpetuate tradition. Norms do restrain and control us so successfully and so subtly that we hardly sense their existence. So, to add more definition to norms, it is the standard for accepted and expected behavior. Norms prescribe proper behavior. In a different sense of the word, norms also describe what most others do, what is normal. So we have the different varieties of norm. We have individual choices. Cultures vary in how much they emphasize the individual self versus others and the society. As a result of this, Western or the usually individualistic countries allow people more latitude in making their own decisions. And then we have expressiveness. To someone from a relatively formal Northern European culture, a person whose roots are in an expressive Latin American culture may seem warm, charming, inefficient, and time-wasting. Then we have the norms in terms of punctuality. In Latin American business executives who arrive late for a dinner, they may be mystified by how obsessed their North American counterparts are with punctuality. Then we have rule breaking. Norms are especially important in traditional collectivistic cultures. Collectivistic cultures are more likely to stigmatize people seen as different, whether through identity such as gays and lesbians or immigrants, or behavior such as heavy drinkers or drug addicts. Then we have personal space. Personal space is a sort of portable bubble or buffer zone that we like to maintain between ourselves and others. As the situation changes, the bubble varies in size. So we have the term personal space. The buffer zone we like to maintain around our bodies. Its size depends on our familiarity with whomever is near us. Then we have norms in terms of cultural similarity. Thanks to human adaptability, cultures differ. Yet beneath the veneer of cultural differences, cross-cultural psychologists see an essential universality. As members of one species, The processes that underlie our differing behaviors are much the same everywhere. Then we have universal friendship norms. People everywhere have some common norms for friendship. For example, in Japan, it is especially important not to embarrass a friend with public criticism. But there are also some apparently universal norms such as respecting the friend's privacy, making eye contact while talking, and then not divulging things said in confidence. So we also have universal trait dimensions. Around the world, people describe others with between 2 and 5 universal personality dimensions. Evaluating others as a good or bad appears across almost all cultures and languages. All cultures have norms, so all cultures evaluate how well others follow those norms. Then we have this universal social belief dimensions. Likewise, there are 5 universal dimensions of social beliefs across 38 countries. People varied in cynicism, social complexity, reward for application, spirituality, and fate control. People's adherence to these social beliefs appear to guide their living. Then we have the universal status norms. This first aspect of this universal norm is that the form of address communicate not only social distance but also social status. It correlates with a second aspect. It is advancing in intimacy are usually suggested by the higher status person. Then lastly, we have the incest taboo. The best known universal norm is the taboo against incest. It is wherein parents are not to have sexual relations with their children nor siblings with one another. Although the taboo apparently is violated more often than psychologists once believed, the norm is still universal. So we now move on to gender. So how are males and females alike and different? Human diversity has many obvious dimensions such as height, weight, hair color, to name a few. But for people's self-concepts and social relationships, the 2 dimensions that matter most is the people that first atone to are race and especially gender. So gender and genes. Gender refers to the characteristics people associate with male and female gender. In psychology, the characteristics, whether biological or social influence, by which people define male and female. Then we have the difference between men and women. So men and women differ in terms of play, such as compared to boys, girls talk more intimately and play less aggressively. And then in terms of friendship, as adults, women, at least in individualistic cultures, they are more likely than men to describe themselves in relational terms, welcome help, experience relationship-linked emotions, and be attuned to others' relationships. And then in terms of vocations, in general, women are more interested in jobs dealing with people such as teachers and doctors, and men in jobs with things such as truck driver and engineer. And then in terms of family relations, women's connection as mothers, daughters, sisters, and grandmothers bind families. In terms of smiling of course varies with situations. Yet across more than 400 studies, women's greater connectedness has been expressed in their generally higher rate of smiling. And then in terms of empathy, when surveyed, women are far more likely to describe themselves as having empathy or being able to feel what another feels, to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So then in terms of social dominance, from Asia to Africa and Europe to Australia, people rate men as more dominant, driven, and aggressive. Moreover, studies of nearly 80,000 people across 70 countries show that men, more than women, rate power and achievement as important. Then we have in terms of aggression, men are more seen as aggressive than women. And then in sexuality, which is another area of marked gender differences, men more often think about and initiate sex, whereas women's sexuality tends to be inspired by emotional passion. So we now move on to evolution and gender. Doing what comes naturally. Evolutionary psychology predicts no sex difference in domains where the sexes face similar adaptive challenges. But evolutionary psychology does predict sex difference in behaviors relevant to mating and reproduction. So we have next is culture and gender. Doing as the culture says. So gender role is a set of behavior expectations for males and females. Then we have the gender roles that vary with culture. Despite gender roles inequalities, the majority of the world's people would ideally like to see more parallel male and female roles. Then we have gender roles that vary over time. In the past half century, a thin slice of our long history, gender roles have changed dramatically. The trends toward more gender equality appear across many cultures. Then we have peer transmitted culture. So it says that much of our culture's influence is transmitted to children by their peers. It means that parents have an important influence, but it's substantially indirect. Parents help define the schools, neighborhoods, and peers that directly influence whether children become delinquent, use drugs, or get pregnant. Moreover, children often take their cues from slightly older children who get their cues from older youth who takes their from young adults in the parents' generation. So, what can we conclude about genes, culture, and gender? So, we don't think of evolution and culture as competitors. Cultural norms subtly yet powerfully affects our attitudes and behavior, but they don't do so independent of biology. Everything social and psychologies is ultimately biological. If others' expectations influence us, that is part of our biological programming. Moreover, what our biological heritage initiates, culture may accentuate.